In the scorching heart of the wastelands of Arizona, where the sun hammered the earth until it turned into cracked clay, and every breath tasted of dust, Ethan Cole rode alone. His horse, a tired bay named Cinder, moved forward with the mechanical patience of creatures that had long forgotten shade. Ethan was no stranger to loneliness, widowed for 8 years, without children, and hardened by an entire lifetime watching good men and better dreams dry up under merciless skies. He carried little: a worn rifle, a half-empty canteen, and the quiet conviction that the world owed him nothing, and he owed it even less. Then he saw her. She was hanging from a rough wooden frame driven into the ground like an afterthought of cruelty. The ropes dug deep into her wrists and ankles, stretching her arms and legs into a tortured X shape. Her deerskin dress, once adorned with fringe and beads, hung in tatters, stained with blood and sweat. Whip marks crossed her back and arms, so fresh that some were still bleeding. Her head hung forward, black hair stuck to her face, but when the wind shifted, Ethan heard it. A low, broken sound that did not quite become a sob.
"Please, I beg you, just put an end to this."
The words scraped out of cracked lips, so weak they seemed to float on the heat waves. She lifted her head with visible effort. Dark eyes, clouded by pain and dehydration, met his. In them, Ethan saw no hatred, only exhaustion. The kind that comes when hope has been whipped until it breaks, lash by lash. He remained motionless in the saddle. His right hand moved instinctively toward the Colt at his hip, not in threat, but by reflex. Mercy killings were not unknown in those lands. Men shot horses with broken legs, sacrificed cattle too far gone to save them. But this was not an animal. It was a Navajo woman, judging by her braids and the faint blue and white beadwork that still hung at her neck, whom they had left alive only long enough to suffer. Ethan dismounted slowly. Gravel crunched beneath his boots. Cinder snorted uneasily. The woman's breathing quickened as he approached. She closed her eyes, bracing for the bullet she expected. But Ethan did not draw his gun. Instead, he took the knife from his belt, an old bowie with a splintered handle and a blade sharpened for fence wire and for fate. He stepped behind the frame, raised the knife, and cut the first rope. It snapped with a dry crack. Her right arm fell like dead weight. She gasped as circulation returned in waves of fire. Before she could collapse completely, Ethan moved to the other side, cut the left rope, then the bindings at her ankles. When the last rope gave way, she crumpled forward. He caught her, too light, far too light, and gently lowered her to the ground. She lay there trembling, eyes wide with disbelief. There were no tears. Her body had none left to give. Ethan knelt, uncapped his canteen, and brought it to her lips. The water was warm, with a faint taste of tin and leather, but she drank in small, desperate sips, as if afraid the miracle would vanish if she hurried. When the canteen was empty, his last water for who knew how many miles, he simply set it aside and helped her sit, leaning against the post of the frame. She stared at him for a long moment.
"Why?"
she asked in a hoarse, barely audible voice. Ethan shrugged, a small, honest gesture. "Because I could." He lifted her onto Cinder's saddle, steadying her when she swayed. Then he walked, leading the horse toward the faint outline of his cabin 10 miles to the east, a low structure of adobe and wood he had built himself after the war. The sun sank, painting the rocks blood red, and neither of them spoke again. Inside the cabin, he laid her on the narrow cot, covered her with his only spare blanket, and lit a small fire to boil what little water remained in the rain barrel. She slept restlessly, murmuring in a language he did not understand. He sat by the door, rifle across his knees, watching the horizon for riders. He knew who had done this. Calder Rook owned half the water in that county, and all the men willing to enforce it. Rumors said he had hanged agitators before. Anyone who dared drink from streams, he claimed. Morning came dry and merciless. The woman woke with fever, her wounds swollen and burning. Ethan cleaned them with the whiskey he kept for toothaches and bandaged them with strips from an old shirt. She watched him work without flinching. "My name is Ayanna," she finally said. "My daughter, Mira, ran when they came. I don't know if she's alive." Ethan nodded once. He asked no questions. Some wounds need more silence than words. The days melted into a rhythm of survival. Ethan dug the well another desperate foot deeper, muscles screaming, throat burning. The last cow died. He skinned it quickly and salted what he could. Ayanna grew stronger, little by little. One afternoon she rose, unsteady but determined, and helped him repair the roof with yucca leaves and mud. When their hands brushed as they passed a bundle of straw, neither pulled away. On the 5th morning, a thin cry crossed the plain. "Chima!" Ayanna froze in the doorway. Ethan stepped outside, hand on his knife. A small figure was approaching unsteadily, barefoot, sunburned, no more than 7 years old. Mira. The girl saw her mother and ran, legs moving despite exhaustion. Ayanna fell to her knees in the dust and caught her daughter in trembling arms. They clung to each other, rocking in silence. Ethan turned halfway away, his throat tight. He had given the child water 5 days earlier, at a broken fence miles to the north, 2 swallows from the same canteen he later emptied for her mother. He had not known they were connected. Fate, it seemed, had its own silent arithmetic. Mira looked at him, her face streaked with tears and dust.
"You are the man who gave me water."
Ethan could only nod. That night, as the 3 of them sat by a small fire, sharing the last beans and hard bread, the sound of hooves was heard in the distance. Calder Rook arrived with 8 armed men. Horses foaming, rifles gleaming. He stopped his horse at the fence with a sneer. "Cole, I heard you picked up some lost ones. Hand them over. The water will flow again. My dam, my rules." Ayanna pulled Mira tight against her. Ethan stood slowly, his hands empty. "This is my land," he said. "They stay." Calder spat. "Land isn't worth much without water, old man. Last chance." Ethan held his gaze. "Then we'll do without it." Calder raised his hand to give the order, but before he could speak, figures appeared on the ridge. Dozens, then hundreds. Navajo riders, silent and steady, rifles raised. Ayanna's people had finally found them. Calder's smile vanished. His men shifted uneasily. Not a single shot was fired. The standoff broke when Calder's foreman muttered something about "not worth dying for Indians." They backed their horses away and then fled at a gallop. 2 days later, under cover of night, tribal scouts broke the dam. Water roared free, cutting new channels through the dried land. By dawn it reached Ethan's well, cold and clear. Ayanna knelt beside the trough, letting the stream run through her hands. Mira splashed and laughed for the first time. Ethan stayed back, watching, feeling something loosen in his chest. Something he hadn't known was knotted. Weeks turned into months. The cabin filled with sound, a child's footsteps, soft voices in 2 languages, the clink of tin cups filled without fear. Ayana planted squash and beans near the spring and taught Mira to ride Cinder bareback. At night, by lamplight, Ayana sometimes sang old songs while mending clothes, and Ethan listened, letting the melodies fill the empty spaces he had kept for years. One evening, as orange light spilled across the porch, Mira climbed into Ethan's lap, wrapping her small arms around his neck. "You'll stay forever," she whispered. He looked at Ayana, standing in the doorway with a gentle smile. Then he looked back at the child. "As far as the eye can see," he said. In the end, there were no grand speeches or medals, only a quiet reminder to like, subscribe, comment where you're listening from, and share this story with someone who still believes mercy matters. A single act, cutting a rope, sharing the last drop, spread outward until it drowned cruelty in kindness. The desert remained harsh, but in its silence, 3 people built something stronger than drought or greed. A place where mercy was not weakness, but the truest form of strength. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you that even the loneliest roads can lead to unexpected hope, make sure you like, subscribe, share the story, and comment where you're listening from, because more powerful frontier stories like this are coming. Stories of courage, redemption, and the moment one brave choice changes everything, changes